Hello, my name is Reverend Hannah Elizabeth Atkins Romero. I'm rector of Trinity Episcopal Church in Midtown Houston, Texas, in the Episcopal Diocese of Texas. We are in the Morrow Chapel, and we have here a parishioner, Angel Williams, who has agreed to be interviewed for a video that we hope will spark good conversation, deep conversation, difficult conversation about race and police violence. We hope that you will join us at our forum on Saturday to continue this discussion. Angel is a retired Houston Police Department officer with 28 years of law enforcement experience in Texas and New York. She's the first African-American crime scene investigator at the Houston Police Department. She was the first Houston Police Department officer to address a former police chief about amending HPD's discrimination and harassment policy in the early 90s, and to include sexual orientation. She, as a triple minority police officer, an African American, a female, and openly gay, Angel has faced some serious challenges within the Houston Police Department. And as a faithful parishioner that generally gathers here in this chapel, we wanted to have this conversation. Today is the day that Houston was invited to give comfort to George Floyd's family, preceding his funeral here. Protests, peaceful in the majority, with some violence, have erupted and been held throughout the country, facing this issue of discrimination, harassment, and the disproportionate killing of African Americans by police. We prepared a few questions, and I want to thank Angel for her courage and her willingness to have this difficult conversation.
Thank you, Reverend.
So my first question is, do you believe that race influences how African Americans are treated by police officers?
Okay, I'd like to first read a disclaimer, and before I could answer the questions. The views and opinions expressed in this or any future forums, podcasts, YouTube videos, etc., are solely my views. They represent my personal opinions and my former experiences as a licensed peace officer in the state of Texas. My words do not in any way necessarily reflect the official policies or positions of any state, federal, local law enforcement agency, specifically not that of the Houston Police Department or any police union or any of its affiliates. So to answer your question, Reverend, yes, I do believe that race plays an important factor in how African Americans are treated. The U.S. Census Bureau reported that 1 in 265 whites were incarcerated and are incarcerated at the local, state, and federal levels, while 1 in 36 African Americans are incarcerated. So that means that blacks in this country is incarcerated at a 7 times higher rate than whites for committing the very same or similar petty offenses. Blacks represent, in the U.S. population, 13%. and 44% of African Americans are incarcerated. And the former FBI director, James Comey, back in February of 2015, revealed that we had some hard truths to talk about. And some of the things that Mr. Comey revealed was that racial bias does in fact exist amongst police officers across the nation. James Comey said that there was a, quote, disconnect between police and Black communities. We're also facing what I believe is some new Jim Crows, and that is when whites continue to maintain positions of power over African Americans. The war on drugs that got started many years ago when former President Nixon was in office led to mass incarcerations of minorities across the country. The stop and frisk policies that were also put in place contributed to mass incarcerations. So yes, race does in fact influence how Blacks are treated by police officers all across the country.
They are disproportionately arrested.
Correct.
So there seems to be a failure in police departments by fairly addressing allegations of police brutality and civil rights violations in African American communities. Do you believe this is the case? And if so, can you please explain?
Yes, I believe that the cries for justice for African Americans have long been disregarded and discounted. The lack of trust in our communities, in African American communities, is widespread. Black people just don't trust the police because of years of oppression and mistreatment and false arrests and killings and so forth. So there's a huge lack of trust between police communities and African American communities. There is also in police communities, I know within the Houston Police Department, a division called IAD, or Internal Affairs Division, that has been created to address the concerns of citizens when they have complaints against police officers. That process, I've long complained in the Houston Police Department, does not work. We cannot have police officers policing themselves. The culture in policing is such that it's mostly police officers, the departments are mostly made up of family and friends. You cannot possibly fairly and objectively investigate your family and friends.
True.
So the Internal Affairs Division does not work because it's an unfair process. Citizens also fear retaliation by police officers from coming forward.
Right.
So there is another issue there.
There's so much to talk about, and we're going to continue to go into all these important issues that Angel's bringing up. But for now, my third question is, do you believe that most African Americans fear victimization by the police?
Absolutely. Yes, I do. And here's why. George Floyd. We're dealing with this right now. I can't breathe. He couldn't go to the local convenience store in his community. Ahmaud Arbery, we can't go jogging. Alton Sterling, we can't sell CDs. Ayanna Jones, we can't sleep. Botham Sean, we cannot relax in the confines of our own home. Tamir Rice, we can't play cops and robbers. Trayvon Martin, we can't walk home eating a bag of Skittles. Sandra Bland, we cannot have normal traffic stops. Philando Castile, we cannot exercise our right, our constitutional right, to bear arms. John Crawford, we cannot shop at Walmart. Eric Garner, again, we can't breathe. There's so many other innocent lives that have been taken by police violence and killings that I can't list them all because of our time constraints. And these tragic incidences should not continue to repeat themselves across our country. And from a historical perspective, in 1619, when slavery first came to this country, blacks in this country were hated, hunted, and killed. And that cycle, that phenomenon continues today. And it's deeply entrenched in our police departments across the country. Police officers across the country is continuing that same hate, the hunt, and the kill. Also, a recent poll, Economist YouGov, reported that 63% of African Americans fear police violence, while only 21% of whites fear police violence. The poll concluded also by saying that police violence is such that African Americans fear being killed by the police officer rather than becoming a victim of a violent crime. That's how serious that is. That's very serious.
So we're talking, of course, about racism, and I want to ask you, as a 28-year veteran of police departments, and like I said at the beginning, the first African-American crime scene investigator, and all the other things that you've had to deal with. In your opinion, what did racism look like in the Houston Police Department when you were a police officer in the early 90s and until your recent retirement in 2013?
Well, when I arrived at the Houston Police Department in 1990 and graduated the academy, I was the only black female in my class. There were a few other black male cadets, but when we graduated and I got onto the streets, I found that racism was deeply entrenched in the Houston Police Department. White police officers were policing black communities, and at an alarming rate. And that, to me, was a recipe for disaster. When I applied, I always wanted to be a crime scene investigator. And in the early 90s, I applied to this elite position within the Houston Police Department. I prepared myself for the position and waited until one would become available. I was college educated. I had a 4-year college degree. I had great offense report writing skills. I had no citizens' complaints against me. And I had a stellar work history. Finally, a position became available, and I was excited about it, and I applied for it. And I was not selected for the position. A white male supervisor decided to select an officer that looked just like him, another white male, a good old boy white male, just like him. That white male officer did not have a college degree, and he had multiple citizens' complaints against him. It was not until I petitioned the police chief to look into the matter. And the police chief looked into the matter and reversed the decision that the white sergeant made to not select me. And I was allowed access into that elite unit. And for the rest of my career in that unit, I suffered retaliation for it, for speaking up and righting the wrong that had occurred. In 2005, in the Houston Police Department, I was 15 years into my career. I was planning to take and preparing for the sergeant's promotional exam. I wanted to be promoted. So there's a 45-day window to study for this promotional exam. And I was off from work with approved time off, studying for the sergeant's promotional exam, when two white supervisors that were over me in my assignment decided to use the internal affairs process to destroy me and either render me ineligible for the sergeant's exam, to take the sergeant's exam and be promoted, or they just wanted me terminated. So they went to IED and filed a false complaint. They concocted a story that never existed. And they went to HPD's Internal Affairs Division and filed the most egregious Class 1 complaint against me, multiple complaints. And while I was at home studying and reading and preparing to take the exam, I was contacted by Internal Affairs in order to report to IED. And I fought for my job. I shifted from studying for the promotional exam, and I had to fight for my job. And the process was long and grueling. So I lost a promotional opportunity, and eventually I was unfairly disciplined. I was given a 15-day suspension for the lies that the sergeants had concocted. And it took almost a year for me to clear my name and for the city to restore the pay that they had stolen from me. So I suffered retaliation throughout my career. And every single time something unjust happened, I fought and I suffered as a result of fighting. This constant fighting over the years, my entire career at HPD, as finally in 2013, I couldn't take it anymore. And I retired prematurely 10 years before I was ready. So these are some of the things that I've experienced personally inside the walls of the Houston Police Department. And I know many other Black officers who have suffered and unfortunately lost their jobs behind some of the same travesties that I've suffered. And this is the same type of suffering that people in the African American community suffering today. They had their foot on my jugular vein all my career, and I couldn't breathe.
I'm so sorry you had to go through all of that. I know you as a very strong person, who would stand up for what is right, who did stand up for what is right, and it took its toll.
Yes.
So from your personal experience and professional experience, what are some of the changes that you feel are necessary in police departments?
I think that police departments across this country need to have transparency. Police departments have to be reminded that we work for the citizens. I know that many citizens want to know about the use of force policy. They want to know what type of policies you have in place. So if police departments really want to be transparent, then allow the public to have access to those policies. If you really desire transparency, then that must be done. I also believe that we need to police departments need to stop policing themselves. As I've alluded to earlier, we cannot fairly and objectively police ourselves in investigations and yield results that are going to be favorable to the citizens. It just doesn't work. I also believe that we need to terminate police officers that have been proven to have engaged in any form of official oppression or have abused their power and abused it in any way. I believe we need to terminate that police officer right away and file criminal charges against that officer. I also believe that we need to have a national oversight committee. The National Oversight Committee will help to standardize police training, monitor police conduct, guide police departments, and prevent shielding police officers and police departments from being civilly sued. Get rid of qualified immunity. I also believe that we need to create a citizens review board and have police officers like myself and other police officers who have access to and who know how to navigate through the system and to help shed light on some of the problems. And with that Citizens Review Board, I believe that the Citizens Review Board need to also have subpoena powers. Without subpoena powers, the review board would be toothless.
Those are excellent, concrete suggestions. A lot of times people want to know what can be done. It's been this way for so long, and it seems like we keep coming back year after year after year, tragedy after tragedy after tragedy. But something has happened now, and people are out on the streets even though it's a pandemic, and they're calling for concrete changes to address, beginning steps to address the deep systemic racism in the police departments and in our country. So, Angel, thank you for bringing your experience and sharing your painful story and your also inspiring story. I mean, you did have to retire early just to take care of yourself, but you also paved the way and made some changes and spoke up for the minority community, African American, women, the gay community, and the police department. And I'd like to think, hearing your story, that you had saved some others from even worse abuse. So,
thank you, Reverend.
I want to ask you, since we are in a church, this is your church community.
Yes.
How does your faith help you witness against racism?
Simple. When I see something, I say something. I was raised in a strong Catholic home with my parents and grandparents and siblings. I went to Catholic schools most of my life. And I was taught early by strict Irish nuns. I'm now Episcopalian, and you're right, I do attend Trinity Episcopal, and I love my church. My faith continues to grow. I learned as a child, very early in my life, to love God, to love my neighbors, and to always do right and stand up even when it's difficult. And these basic tenets, I've carried them with me throughout my life. And they were deeply entrenched in me by the time I reached the Houston Police Department in the early 90s. And that is how I've lived my life. My job was to help people and not hurt them. And any opportunity that I had in my career to help people, by God, I did that. And I was hoping to continue my career, but the pressure and stressors from all that had happened had built up, much like, and pent up inside of me, much like what we see today. The revolution that's underway today on the streets, all across the world. This is how I felt. I've been so pent up and bottled up all my career as a Houston police officer. And so I'm hoping that shedding some light with you, with the congregation and with others, that real change will emerge. And real change will help to solve the solutions that we see today.
We're all made in God's image and likeness, and we are to respect that image and likeness of God in each and every human being and to serve Christ in each other. And I hope that in our discussions in the forum that people will be able to also contribute. And then after, we will make a call for folks to tell their own story from their own perspective. We hope for more real, inspiring, but also I feel like your story holds our feet to the fire. We can't just talk about things. We have to be a part of what changes so that every human being's dignity is respected. And so we are going to, as a community of faith, ask for testimonies and truth-telling for ourselves as well. What has happened to us and what we have done, and how we have participated in the systems of racism, even when we want to be good people, or even when we think we're good people. We need to speak deep truths to each other. So I invite you to participate in the forum on June 13th at 5 p.m. Look at the Zoom link on Trinity's website. We also, a Facebook page, and we also want you to begin thinking about submitting audio recordings of your life and your stories, which we will then curate and share with the wider world as we continue to look for ways to stand up for the rights of every person and to stand against racism. Thank you once again, Angel.
You're welcome, Reverend. Thank you for having me and for allowing this platform so that my story and the stories of so many officers that I know can be told.
God bless you.
Thank you, Reverend.